Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us in the sunny Cannes. It's a pleasure to host you all here, and it's a pleasure to be with great people from the industry to talk about what's at risk and how cookies are playing a big thing on privacy of the users and how it impacts what we are all doing. So first of all, I'm Stefan. I'm gonna introduce myself. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Ogury, and been there since like slightly less than a year. But super happy to be here. And I'm gonna pass on the mic to Bao. If you want to introduce yourself first.
Yes, thanks. Bao Cheng Win here, SVP of Product at Cision, and I've been delivering product for almost 2 decades now in the SaaS space. And post-pandemic, I started focusing in on media intelligence and press release. So.
I'm Mark Pappas. I lead the innovation team for CMI Media. We're part of WPP. We're like the health pharmaceutical wing of WPP. We control about $1 billion in ad spend for our clients. And I'm focused primarily on partnerships, developing new partnerships, innovative media offerings for the brands that we work on.
Hi, all. I'm Van Valdez. Just kidding. I'm actually not Van. He's not here today. Unfortunately, his flight got canceled at the last minute, so I'm going to be stepping in. I'm the director of brand marketing at Ogury, and I'm excited to talk to you about some of the research we did with IDC, and hopefully I can do it justice.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So my first question is actually towards you, Sabina. We've made
Van.
a great Van. So we made a great research end of last year with IDC about the impact of cookies and IDs and them going away with brands and agencies. What do you have to tell us about it?
Yeah, exactly. We did a 6-month study all over the world, 1,000 respondents, brands and agencies, and we learned some really interesting things. So 60% of advertisers agree that cookies are going away. There's no question about that. Most of the industry understand that's going to happen. But then additionally, 60% of them also believe that brand reputation is at risk if we continue to use cookies. So it's really this idea of the status quo is no longer going to suffice anymore. But what's interesting is that although we're seeing that, okay, we know that brand reputation is at risk, we know that cookies are going away, at the same time, only 47 or 41% are only moderately to not at all aware of cookieless solutions. So there's a huge knowledge gap here. So in addition to that knowledge gap, where agencies and brands are just not feeling confident that they understand, what solutions are out there, what exists, there's also a little bit of tension between brands and agencies, where 61% of brands are pretty confident that they can reach audiences at scale, whereas only 51% of agencies. So you see that the brands are really, leaning on their agency partners to help them bridge that gap, to understand how are they going to be able to reach audiences at scale in the future. So those were two really interesting kind of areas that we explored. In addition to that, we also looked at measurement. So looking at VCR, it was surprising to us to find out that actually 70% of advertisers feel that it's misleading. And considering that most people in the industry are using this KPI, but they find it misleading, means that there's a big gap there as well. So from an attention perspective, we know that 60% feel that attention is actually a more holistic measurement KPI to use. So that was interesting too. We definitely see some movement towards attention away from VCR. So those are. Sorry.
I just want to ask a question. So only 60% think that cookies are going away? I was just surprising. I mean, I figure that's like all anyone's been saying for a while now, but it's interesting to see that with your data, you saw that only 60% think that that's actually happening. They say
that's a great point.
They're the 40%, and they just I don't know. It just seems very, very odd.
I think some of them probably weren't sure, but yeah.
Well, I think on that note, we see somebody like Google who said that they were going to go away from cookies in 2021 and in 2022, and now it's 2024.
It'll probably
keep
going.
Yeah, so I think that's part of the reason why it's like if we kept moving it as an industry, then people are certain about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it has been like the year of mobile for so many years. It's not potentially the year of no longer the cookies for quite some years. But yeah, we're waiting on Google to actually make the things move a little bit fast forward, which it's happening. It's really happening. Now they've really set up a schedule which is going to be way more precise than what it was. But we talked about brands, we talked about agencies and the cookies, etc. But what about the consumer? I'm going to be curious about what consumers and how they are perceiving cookies and IDs, and especially focusing more and more with privacy than they used to. How does that change for you? How do you see the consumers shifting their behavior, having an impact on what you're doing? Wow, for you.
Absolutely. I think brands are realizing that the consumer privacy mishandling of it, actually, with all the incidents that happened within the last decade or so, is detrimental to their business and frankly their bottom line. So managing it and advertising and marketing, taking a public approach around protecting the consumer privacy is actually enhancing their ultimate bottom line and their ROI. So I think it's actually now part of brand strategy to advocate for those kind of brands.
So it's part of the brand communication scheme.
It is, yeah.
That's interesting. So more and more the brands are still kind of focusing on their consumers, being more and more cautious about privacy and being privacy minded from what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not just about the execution or the implementation of it, but it's about the communication, like you said, in order to kind of enhance their reputation as a protector of, in a way, of their brand, right? As a protector of the consumer privacy, it's also a protection of their brand. So
that's very interesting. Mark, as you're in the healthcare, I assume that privacy is also kind of the subject matter for you.
Just a little bit, yeah. It's probably the number one priority as far as consumers go, especially when we're working with very sensitive conditions. When we get into things like, with cookies and leveraging that data to retarget. I mean, consumers are already very apprehensive. They're like, if you're 3 sites away from when you initially started, you're going to target it with like lung cancer ads. It's like, that's, a little dicey and a little bit of invasion of privacy somewhat. So we want to make sure that, anything we are doing to reach the brands, privacy is number one concern. And, last thing we want is to have a brand just basically plastering, their messaging everywhere, which, we want to make sure we're hitting the right person at the right time and not just like completely bombarding them and abusing that data.
Talking about like how brands are kind of concerned or taking care of privacy, do you have like examples or stuff that come into your mind? Like how do you manage the communication about like being more privacy safe or cookie-less if we are talking about technologies, but like more privacy minded with your brands?
So at Cision, we actually we don't collect clients' data at the cookie level. So what we leverage is what I would consider like second-party data, as opposed to third-party cookies data. And anything that we essentially pass back to the clients has to essentially adhere to the strictest U.S. law around PII regulation and compliance, etc. So as a result of that, the data that we analyze and enrich, the volume of data that comes in has to kind of meet a certain criteria before it gets translated and then resurfaced back as a metric, such as viewership to an article count or a readership, etc. And that's how we approach this issue. By passing it all together.
Yeah. Nice. Mark?
So as far as, again, the health and pharma side of things, there's 2 main ways that we handle it, like with physicians, which is a whole different campaign. In the US, every physician has an individual registration number. So with that, our brands all have target lists with exactly who they're trying to reach with that number. So that is like the one side of things. With the privacy side, on the consumer side, that's where we don't collect any first party data. We leverage on, typically like patient models and things like that to make sure we're reaching the right patient at the right time and making sure that, we're not doing it in a very like Black Mirror creepy-ish way to at least like to the consumer. But we're still getting that message into them when we need to.
Thank you.
I was just going to say that I think that right now brands and companies are a little bit lost in terms of how to manage this with regulations changing so quickly, changing in different markets or different states. And I think there's definitely some opportunity for thought leadership around, what are the best practices for how to communicate with consumers and viewers, but also how do we kind of bring companies and agencies and brands along for the ride?
But we said earlier that we have 60+% brands that are kind of not knowing that this is coming. 50% of the agencies that helping.
So 60% feel that they're going to be able to achieve reach and scale. Only 50% of agencies. So there's a little bit of a gap there, right? There's 10% difference of confidence levels.
How is this like kind of happening? How do you think that brands are actually well educated? How can we educate them better to understand that what's coming is important for them and how they can actually continue to achieve their scale? What's your view on this one?
Yeah, I think that that's just kind of the nature of the business and the importance that agencies play in their client partners' lives, and being kind of the educational source for them in terms of what solutions are out there, what sources are out there, and how can, really being the advisors and the specifiers of the industry. So I think our job is to try to make sure that they're armed with tools and with data and with information, but then also making it easy for them to pass that information on to their brands as well.
Because I believe that you are well suited because your brands are already aware of this coming. Do you see like any differences in how it matches with at a regional level, for example, in EMEA or in America or in APAC or even in the US, like in between the states that are adopting some privacy laws versus the one that are not adopting privacy laws? Like Mark, what's your point of view?
I mean, as an agency, we've been just following the lead of what California's been doing and basically just rolling out the most restrictive regulations, just applying that to all. Because I mean, it can definitely get messy as far as like, it's not like there's like a physical border really around the state of California. So, things can cross state lines digitally. But yeah, we always take the stance of whatever those most restrictive, especially in this house space, we just apply that to all countrywide.
Yeah. The decision it's a very similar approach. We essentially take California as the model for just adhering to the PII laws, and one product for the entire continent really. So there's really no California version of any sense for what we are delivering. I will say though, between EMEA and the US or APAC, there's a slight difference. So everybody here is probably aware, if you're in the media space, especially media monitoring, if you start playing in APAC, it's completely different rules based on kind of just a geopolitical situation there. So it's very different. And then in terms of EMEA with GDPR, in fact, we have certain product that we do not sell in that market as a result of this. Just as a matter of fact, it's just not enough bang for your bucks kind of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting from an IDC standpoint in terms of the study. The results around the perceptions of privacy and cookieless and where the industry is going was very consistent across all markets. However, adoption and how they're handling, moving away from cookies obviously is a little bit slower in the US because regulations are a little bit behind, beyond California. But obviously in Europe, that's not necessarily the case. And then Asia was an interesting example because there were some markets that were really pushing this and have very strong concerns around privacy, like Australia, for example. But it was kind of a mixed bag in Asia. So definitely the movement is going in that direction, but yeah.
Okay, this is interesting. And actually, yes, we are seeing like EMEA as driving a little bit the boat when it comes. No specific allusion where we are, but driving a little bit the boat where it comes to privacy and actually how it's going to evolve. We talked about scale, but we haven't talked about performance, like KPIs. How do we see the kind of the world evolving, like when we are no longer going to have a way to track users and understand what they are doing beyond being exposed to an ad or beyond to exposed to a specific message? Is there something that you are on your end kind of understanding, trying to find solutions? Or is it something that no, because you are dealing with different ways that it's not really of a concern for you. Like for example, Bao.
So as I mentioned earlier, at Cision, we don't actually use third-party cookies, so it's less applicable for us. I will say that for the partners that we work with that do provide sort of like the second-party data, um, for those that are using third-party cookies, we are seeing a shift in their approach. And then in terms of partners that aren't actually relying on it at all, we're actually shifting more heavily towards our exposure to them versus those that do use cookies. So
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we've been shying away from third-party data for a while now. I think since Google announced it for the, the first time out of five that they were pushing it back. But as far as measurement goes and making sure that we're reaching like the correct audience, I mean, we're trying to get most of our clients to stop looking at, traditional vanity metrics, for lack of a better word, like clicks and things like that, and focus on attention metrics. So we actually know that we're finding somebody that's interested in engaging with the content instead of click and what does that tell us really. So really trying to like shift the way that we're providing a lot of this results to the clients and showing the interaction, hopefully by reaching the correct audience.
I think from a research standpoint, across the board, we saw that, there was a lot of enthusiasm for attention, and I think they felt like the that KPI was more reliable in some cases, but there's still a little bit of some questions around how is it measured, and there's a lack of understanding around that. And I think once that catches up, that will be, the core metric used. But then I also wonder what else is going to come. What is the next KPI that we should be looking at, as the entire industry kind of moves towards cookieless? I'm sure there's going to be other ones that are helping us understand engagement.
It's interesting because with attention, we probably have the ability to reach a large audience. But is this the right audience? That's the question that I'm always asking myself, because it's easy to find a good attention metric, but actually not reaching the right audience. Does that make sense, actually? Like if I'm talking to people who are not interested in what I'm sending as a message, obviously, even though I have the greatest attention, it's potentially not what we are willing to reach as an audience. So it's to me, attention is a great metric, but it's not by itself sufficient. It still has to be linked to the right audience. And I'm gonna use this as a segue to basically kind of talk about what we are doing within Ogury since more than a year now in actually trying to elaborate personified advertising, meaning that we are willing to find the right audiences within an environment which is becoming cookieless and ID-less, and being privacy minded and trying to reach and map audiences within an not without cookies and IDs is actually very important, because we talked about scale. This is one way for us to keep and maintain the scale. And plus, when we are mapping this with attention, then we are reaching the perfect equation where we can actually reach at scale audiences without being concerned with privacy, but also delivering a good attention to these specific audiences. So now I'd like kind of curious about what will you see in the coming 3 to 5 years in becoming the next evolution within our industry, because we are reaching like the privacy world, and Ogury is helping in this world to become much more efficient than what it's supposed to be without cookies and IDs. We are helping through the attention to reach both the scale and the attention. What's next, your point of view? Wow.
I can start with that. So I actually think that with the technology that we have in place right now, and just how creative humans are, I think once you start blocking cookies, people are going to get really creative with the first party data in terms of how they're going to approach that. There's going to be more questions getting asked, and then also with frankly zero party data as well. In terms of voluntary information or what consumer would be willing to share for whatever reason, I think those type of data is actually even more effective than tracking through cookies. So if you combine that with technology such as AI or machine learning, you probably going to actually end up with even more personalized target advertising than what we have now. So I think that's where the industry is going to go.
When I hear the word AI, I always fear a little bit about the future. So yeah, I've been like, I grow with Terminator in mind, so I'm a bit scared about this. But
It's gonna be
I
scary.
agree. Yeah, it's a bit scary in some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if the AI doesn't kill us all in the next 3 to 5 years, and I predict Google's probably going to push back again the death of cookies. That's my prediction. If I was a betting man, but yeah, no, I think definitely, the pushing clients away from third-party data. Obviously, that's like number one. The shift more attention metrics, at least for the brands that we've been working with. And then, I mean, I know we talked about this earlier, but there's a huge push now on the sustainability side of things, which is another huge thing because of the amount of carbon generated in the ad tech industries now. Like all of our clients have these like climate initiatives and stuff like that in place. So we want to make sure that we're doing this in the most carbon neutral way possible, which is, it's a big lift there, but that's where we're seeing like there's going to be a lot of focus with our clients is going away from third-party cookies, attention metrics, and then sustainability.
So this is probably a little strange to say, but I think we're actually going to go back to the old days of advertising in a way. What I mean by that is that
Direct mail.
direct mail. No, just kidding. What I mean by that is that we always used personas and sophisticated segments, and we were really creative in terms of how we put those segments together. And now we have tools and we have digital tools to help us do that in a way that also drives privacy. So I think for me, it's about how do we drive brand equity at a higher level so that brands have one meaning and one kind of elevator pitch across everything that they do. And so I think it's going to be all about that segmentation.
Well, I hope that we're not going to come back to the early days of digital advertising, because it's going to be back like the 468. And I started with that, so I hope that we are still going to move forward. But yeah, I understand what you're saying.